Welcome to the CyExNg Quick Start Guide. As always, you can find information and documentation on CyExNg and other RaceSec products and services at racesec.com. After purchasing your CyExNg license, you will receive an email with a link to the latest CyExNg files as well as documentation. To get started, go to racesec.com/download. Here you will find the CyExNg installation files for many different versions, as well as the offline documentation in PDF format. First, download the CyExNg installation files. After clicking CyExNg, you'll see various versions of the product. Ensure you download the latest CyExNg release for the latest features and bug fixes. Check the CAPTCHA box and wait for the download to start. Go back to Downloads and click on Documentation. Then download the CyExNg installation guide. Open up the CyExNg documentation. CyExNg is a Linux application which has been tested on numerous Linux distributions. However, the most thorough testing has taken place on Debian and Ubuntu. It is our recommendation that you utilize one of these distributions. Today I'll be installing CyExNg on Ubuntu 14.04. The first section of the documentation will cover the dependencies that CyExNg requires. First, install updates on your system. Now the system updates are complete. Next, set your time zone to UTC. This is required by CyExNg to deal with all time zones. Select none of the above. Then select UTC. Your time is now set to UTC. Install Apache MySQL and PHP using the Task Selection Wizard. Select LAMP server from the menu, and then OK. Type a password for your MySQL root user. Ensure you note this password as it will be used in the CyExNg config files. Confirm your password. The LAMP installation is now complete. Next, install all the Perl modules required for the CyExNg modules. This can be accomplished in Ubuntu or Debian by using the following apt-get line. The Perl modules are now installed. If you're using a distribution other than Debian or Ubuntu, you may be able to install the Perl modules using this cpan line. However, depending on your distribution, you may need other dependencies installed. Finally, ensure you install SSH so that you can remotely manage your scoring engine. If this is not installed, run it now. Next, configure dependencies for CyExNg. If you plan to utilize the Auto Manual Event Creation Wizard utilizing Nmap, you'll need to increase the PHP post variable size limit. To do this, edit the PHP ini file and change the max input vars value to 100,000. Save the file. Next, restart the Apache service. Note that depending on your distribution, the service name may be different. For Ubuntu 14.04, the service name is Apache 2. The next section pertains to downloading CyExNg. Since you already did this, you'll need to download your license key file next. In the email you received after purchasing your CyExNg license, you will have a license key file download link as well as a password to access this file. Copy the password and access the license link. Paste your password into the box. After downloading the CyExNg files and your license, you'll need to copy them to your server. You can do this with any file transfer method supported, such as FTP or SCP. In this case, I'll be using OneSCP, which is a free and open source SCP client. The next section covers installation of CyExNg on your system. Keep in mind that you'll need to replace the X's and the commands in this section with the version of CyExNg you are installing. Next, run the installation file as root. This will install the CyExNg software. The files have now been installed. Next, you'll need to move your license key file to the CyExNg installation directory. Note that your license key file will have a unique file name, different from what you see here. Note that I will also be moving the license file to a new file name called license.key. The next section covers configuring the CyExNg installation. First, copy the example configuration file over to a new file. This is necessary in order to prevent CyExNg updates from overwriting your configuration file. Next, edit the configuration file and update the contents with your database information. If you are running the database on a separate server, enter the IP address here. Otherwise, leave this to its default. Set the username to your database user. Note that the permissions must be set to read and write, as well as the ability to create databases. Set the password to the password of your database user. Earlier, I set my database password to example1. Set the port to the port of your database service. In most cases, this should be left to the default value. Set the database to the name you wish to use for the CyExNg database. This is where all your data will be stored. Keep in mind this database should not already exist. The CyExNg setup steps will create it for you. Set the path to the file location where the CyExNg modules are located. In most cases, the path should be left to the default value. The license should be set to the location where you have your license file. As I renamed my license to license.key, I will change it here. When you have completed editing the file, save and exit. Next, configure the CyExNg web interface. Copy the example configuration file over to a new file. As with the normal configuration file, this should be done in order to prevent CyExNg updates from overwriting your configuration file. Next, edit the web configuration file. The web configuration file utilizes many of the same settings as the last configuration file. For example, set the database host to the IP address of your database server. Set the database username to the username you selected for your database. Set the database password to the password for your database user. In my case, I will change this to example1. Set the database DB to the name of the database you are utilizing. Set the module path to the location of the CyExNg modules. Now we're getting into a section that did not exist in the last configuration file. Set the web path to the location of the CyExNg web files. For most installations, leave this to the default setting. Set webdir to the subdirectory you wish to use for the CyExNg web instance. If you wish to have your website automatically redirect to the CyExNg instance, see the documentation for further details. Set the web protocol to HTTP for unencrypted or HTTPS for encrypted. We recommend this is changed to HTTPS in most cases. In most cases, the host address can be left to false as it will auto-generate. If for some reason this is not working correctly, set the host address to the IP address or host name of your server. Finally, change the configured line to true. This will enable the web configuration settings. Do not edit anything below the settings as described here. Save and exit the file. Next, configure the CyExNg daemon, which will allow you to start and stop the CyExNg service. Leave the path to the default settings as shown. Set the name to the CyExNg executable, which by default is called CyExNg. Set the daemon to the path where CyExNg is located. By default, this should be left to this value. Set the daemon arguments to the configuration file you're using, as well as the ID number for the event. We will cover this in a later tutorial. Save and exit the file. Next, manually run the CyExNg engine once, which will update and configure the database. For the initial CyExNg installation, or any updates, you must run the engine manually once. Do not attempt to perform this step by using the CyExNg daemon or other automated means. Your database setup is now complete. You could populate the database with your desired events and service checks. However, for the purposes of this tutorial, we will skip this step. This will be covered in a future tutorial. Press Enter to continue. You can safely ignore the error shown. Next, log into the CyExNg web interface. This can be done by accessing the hostname if you're utilizing DNS or the IP address otherwise. Click the Login button and log into CyExNg using the default username and password, which is admin and password. Click the Login button. You have now successfully logged into the CyExNg web interface. We recommend immediately changing your admin password. This is covered in the user management documentation. You now have access to the CyExNg online documentation. This covers various topics from setting up the CyExNg product to managing users and configuring events. This concludes the CyExNg Quick Start Guide. As always, you can find more information on RaySec and our products and services at raysec.com. Thanks for watching.